Alright, bit of an early stream for me today. If you haven't seen this before, it's basically just me practicing, so it's like watching paint dry. But I'm going to be practicing anyway, so I might as well stream it. And if anyone has any questions, you can just put that in the chat and I'll get to it in between exercises. I do have a metronome. I do have a metronome on in the background that you can't hear. It's 80 BPMs, and I mainly use eighth notes for practice. Yes, I'm slow in more than one way. All right. Hey, Logan. Nice to see you again. Transparent. Good morning. Yeah, it's gonna be hot today as well. And I'm streaming early today because it's our wedding anniversary, so we're going into town. So I don't mind the nice weather. Yeah, gonna keep practicing. What I'm doing now is just systematic, going through the left hand in two finger combinations, which would be 1 2 1 3 1 4 2 3 2 4 3 4. Hey Juan, nice to see you, man. And then same thing with three fingers: 1 2 3 1 2 4 1 3 4 2 3 4. And I find that very effective for just keeping my chops in shape, because when you play a lick or even scale, sometimes it can be skewed towards certain finger combinations. So I find this a good way to keep everything in check. And also it sounds nice. No, it doesn't. But it's, yeah. Good morning, AA. Juan, do you... Juan, okay, so you ask, do you at any one time change the 80 BPM approach once you have done so much of the same thing, or stay faithful to it slow one? No, I keep it at... Also, there's nothing magical about 80 BPMs. It's just a tempo that I've found for me where it's getting close to where I can't make sure my technique is as perfect as possible, right? If I did this at one note per beat at 80 BPMs, that would also probably make it even more perfect, but on the other hand, I would get half the reps in. So I try to find a balance between how many reps I can get in per practice session and the quality of my technique. So I could do this at 16th notes at 80 BPMs, or I could probably do it to 32nd notes at 80 BPMs, right? But the quality will be way lower, and then it's no point in my mind to repeat anything, because what I'm focusing on here is making sure my fingers aren't flying away, that I'm relaxed, that I use transition time, meaning that I don't do this. You can see I almost have like mechanical movements, but that's because I hold this note as long as I can, move to this note. So I'm basically trying to shift from note to note as quickly as possible, or transition, that hence the name transition time. But then you see in between here, I just fuck around with, I try to do that minimally here, but when I practice by myself, it's easy to get stuck into this stuff, but I try not to, because I want to, get as much practice time in as I do it, because what I'm doing in between now, even though it might be, all right, it's not gonna necessarily make my technique better, right? So that's more just fun stuff. So yes, obviously I try to play things faster as well, but there's no point in me either to sit with like an exercise like, what's the point of making that go faster, right? I'm doing this to get the technique right, because all these movements are going to be used in other more musical things. So I absolutely do not agree with the thing that some people say, like, oh, if you only practice exercises, you're gonna only be good at exercises. That's not the case at all, I think, because it's probably a bigger danger in terms of improvising, for example. If you always practice like stuff like that when you doing your technique work, which I also do, but if you only do that and then you'd be like, okay, do you want to improvise? Yeah, sure. And then you're here, you have the scale shape that's going to work, or the scale tonality is going to work, and then you're so used to doing a certain sequence, so you kind of go on autopilot, which is not really good improvising. And this is not only me saying this. I actually heard Scott Henderson, like master improviser, talk about why he would never work on stuff like because he doesn't want to end up playing that stuff on the gig. And my thinking here, then, unless I've fall and hit my head, I would never think of like, okay, let's jam, and I'm like, that wouldn't happen. But this stuff will give me the technique to play around in the scales and do different skips and whatever, because I prepared my hands to do that. But that's my thing. Do you have any courses sweeping with the double picking your technique, 2 strings especially? Well, I mean, I bought his stuff way back in the day. I started with him privately, even though I was in Sweden. But we had actually an actual phone call every week, which was kind of funny. And he sent these CD-ROMs. It was like 98. And I remember it was like $80 which is per CD-ROM. And it was a bit pricey back then, but totally worth it for me. So he basically showed that kind of stuff. But it's tricky, but it's not anything weird really. It's just right, so you can, and also you have 4 variations really, but I don't. He didn't use all of them, I think. But if you take this, like, so you have 2 notes, right? So down, up, down. Then you can go start on the second note and go up, down. And then you can start with an upstroke on this one. And then but it's like I kind of don't use it much. I learned it, but it's such a technique that I associate that so much with bellows. So it kind of feels like it kind of almost feels like doing this. It's cool to play and all, but I wouldn't use it in any of my stuff. Not because I don't like the sound, but it's so connected to one player. Saying that though, it's really helpful to work on this thing because it helps with your overall sweep picking, right? Because it gives you more control in the right hand. Actually, if you practice this more. Actually, I'm gonna do that on the top E string just for fun. I will basically sit around and do stuff like that. But also one thing that hey Marshall, yeah, you say that, wouldn't you? But what bellows would do though is this as well. So he basically goes up the triad and then down. Wow. which was also kind of cool. But I've never been super fan of like repeating the notes on the top. I think this one is kind of cool. Here you go. So that's... But I mean, you do this in your sleep, Marshall. But and also George had some weird patterns. We would go, and I never practiced it because I didn't like the idea of it. And it was to go, we have this type of arpeggio. Instead of going, I have to turn off the metronome here. So instead of going just that, we would add this note. But then to get through that, you would double pick that. And I never liked the... You don't really hear it, but I know that it's there, and for whatever reason, I've never liked this kind of double picked stuff. Same thing when people do the... I'm more like... move it up a scale note. Yeah, do that, Marshall. But I would look up airborne. So airborne, A-I-R born. That has like a middle section where it's just cuts out and it's just his guitar. I think it's doubled by some keyboard in the background, but he does all this sweep stuff, and he actually goes into that kind of thing as well. So he's a big influence, actually. Didn't see that coming, Gold Agents. I could see, hey Marshall, you've been a huge influence on me for something else, but not reading, sight reading. But that's cool. Marshall Harrison, master sight reader. Hey Gold Agent. All right, I'm gonna keep practicing now. I need it. I saw your thing about putting tabs on screen, Marshall, but this is just me randomly practicing stuff, and you know what a ball ache it would be to tab out, especially long form stuff. And you know, for most people, I think people just check in there for a second, and the work wouldn't really be worth it. It's more about showing, you know, how I practice. I would love to see you do this, Marshall, where you just practice and you don't do the thing. You know, it would be so cool if you imagine if you could have seen like Yngwie or Holsworth or whoever stream their practice. That would be quite insane. And also have the mic off here because when I make mistakes, the profanity comes out. I try to keep that down low. Good night, Marshall. The funny thing about this slow practice, and once you've done it about 30 minutes, you can feel some kind of difference, difficult to explain, but like your brain rate some change. Yeah, but that's the thing. And you can, if you do this consistently, day by day, it compounds as well. Because I don't want to give my brain any any chance of confusion, right? So, and another thing they've discovered the last couple of years is that apparently when you repeat something, anything we repeat, whether it's good quality or bad quality or whatever, our brain, if I play something like, if I stop now, my brain is gonna repeat that at like, I think it's like a ridiculous speed, basically. I don't know how they managed to find this out, but they've done it. They've done studies on it, and for whatever reason, it repeats it backwards as well. So it's almost like the brain is encoding stuff super fast after we've done something. So in my mind, then it makes more sense, even though I practiced like this for years before, and why the slow practice works is that your brain has better, stronger information than if you sit there and do really fast things, and maybe you do some micro mistakes you don't even hear at that tempo. So I think, yeah, but I don't really care why it works. I know that it works, so I'm gonna keep doing it, and people can push their speeds and clean it up later, bro, however they want. So yeah, that's the thing, Transparent. But the thing is, I'm not naturally patient either. I want to get better as quickly as possible, but this is the way that I found the quickest way. So me sitting, just fucking around and doing bad reps, that's gonna take it, will take even longer to get where I want to go, if I even will get there ever, right? So by focusing on accuracy, I know that every time I practice, I'm gonna get a little bit better. Gold Agent, question about your picking hand. Your middle finger seems to stick out more than others. Is it better to really curl in your finger with a closed hand grip? Or I don't think, if you look at all the different great pickers, from, well, Marshall Harrison, for one, who was here, and then you have Gilbert, you have Petrucci, you have Steve Morse, you have Vinnie Moore, you have who else? There's so many people, but they all do it slightly differently. Some people keep their hand like this, and Gilbert style, and then Petrucci would rest a finger like that, and then you have Vinnie Moore, kind of similar, but he would use the whole arm. And then you have Steve Morse that I can't even replicate, and then you have Ingves. So there's so many different ways of doing it, and I think every way has some things are going to be easier with certain picking styles, and some things are going to be harder. So it's going to be a trade-off. But I think the biggest thing here, and why all these different players ended up with their picking technique, is because they went for a sound, right? So I think that's a big part of it, and that's a big part for me, where I don't, I want to have a solid note, and I know that if I try to keep the picking super tight, it's not gonna do that. And then when you play faster, then you can light it up on the pick a bit, because you don't need as much force when you do that. Yeah, Marty Friedman as well. So I don't think it matters much, and I think looking into those details too much is just gonna get you, in the words of Terry Cyrick, the dreaded GIFO disease, and that stands for got it figured out. Basically, he told so Terry Cyrick, amazing guitar player, he told a story when he was at Berkeley, where he would have this friend come up to him like, Terry is like, yes, I got it figured out now. I saw Paul Gilbert pick, and he does this. And then he was like, oh, great. So he went away. Then he came back, a couple of days later. Hey, Terry. Like, yeah, I got it figured out again. I saw Ingve. So this is the way to do it. And basically, the moral of the story was that this guy kept changing his picking style, and he never got anywhere. So don't do that. I think it's just make sure to listen to what you're doing, and go from there. And what it looks like doesn't really matter that much. You know, there's some people who think like there's only one way to do it, but that's not true. If you look at all the you know, just to pick guitar players that I listed, you know, 5 or 10, 5, 6, well, however many it was, they all sound great in their own right, but they all do it completely differently. So yeah. Yeah, but I've gone through that as well, Gold Agent. I think everyone does. One thing, I don't agree with that, Juan, because I think you can get the sound with pretty much any technique you have, and even like Michelangelo talked about, oh, whatever you do, don't move the thumb when you pick. And then you look at Cesario Filho, the Brazilian Yngwie guy. He sounds amazing, and he distinctly does this. So there's always going to be, I could say like, don't do that, and then you have some person doing just the opposite of what I said and sounds great. So it's kind of like, okay. So even with my approach to practice, I practice really slowly, and I found that really works for me because I can focus on techniques that I know is gonna take my overall technique to a better place. But I'm sure there's some people out there that never practice slow in their life and sound amazing. I doubt it though, because it kind of goes against how we learn as humans. But the thing is, when I'm preaching about my slow practice, it's more about if you had trouble with the other ways of doing it, the whole push to speed and all that stuff, which I don't think works. Try my approach, and hopefully that will work for you as well. I know it's worked for, hundreds of students that I've had. So, but if whatever way you're doing it works for you, keep doing that. I'm not gonna, I'm not your dad. You can do whatever you want. So I'm not trying to tell people you have to do it a different way. But if you haven't had the results that you want with other approaches, try something new, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So. So one thing that I focus on when I practice anything is that I have 3 boxes ticked. I have an acronym RAT, R-A-T. So basically stands for relaxation, accuracy, and tone. The first 2 are quite, self-explanatory, but the tone one has nothing to do with the distortion or whatever I have on my amp. It's more about the tone you get when you hit the instruments. If I have I need to like the sound, because otherwise, what's the point? Even if you're relaxed and you're accurate, but you sound like shit in terms of like not the accuracy, but the tone you're getting. You can still be accurate and be down back here and sound like a bad sitar. So those 3 boxes need to be ticked for me when I practice anything. And yeah, and then it's just about doing way more reps than you ever wanted to do in your life. That's the way to do it. And I made a video about this on YouTube, where I call it Paul's practice hack or something. But basically, it's Paul Gilbert talking about practicing in front of the TV. And his philosophy was, it's so boring to do this stuff. So he'd rather be 70% focused and actually get the work in than trying to go for 100% focus and then be bored out of his mind and never end up doing it, because you need a shit ton of reps. No, Roy Sibb is like the speed burst guy, but I also heard him in interviews say that, yeah, it only works to a certain extent, right? So speed burst is a good technique. It is, because speed burst, if you do a speed burst correctly, you're still gonna be accurate. No, I don't think there's any picking grips that are elite. The only thing I say is that if a student comes to me and they ask me about a better pick grip, generally I don't change people's picking in any way unless there's some issue they are having, right? Because again, that would be hypocritical on me, because I really do believe like people can do it differently. I mean, if Marty Friedman came to me and he wasn't Marty Friedman, I would probably be like, dude, that looks weird. But but you know, he made it work anyway. But for picking, if someone wants my advice on that, I just tell them do this, relax, and then tuck this finger in, put the pick here. So the idea here is to get as much pick on the finger as possible to make it stable, and then have the thumb on top. And when I do this, I don't need to push the thumb, because as soon as, if you look at my arm here, as soon as I push the thumb, the whole arm is gonna start tensing up. So I want to just be have a grip where the pick stays where it is, whether I'm holding on to it or not. So that's the way that I would you know, give advice to anyone who actually needed that. And also the pick angle. If you pick straight on like this, it's really hard to get through the string, and I personally don't like the sound. But then again, we have Kiko Loureiro, who's like, he didn't like this sound, so he always goes like this, and he sounds amazing. So it's very difficult to say like, do it like this. Maybe in 100 years we will have a standardized technique that, you know, this actually works best for everyone. Like if you look at violin or piano, whatever. But even there, you have different schools of piano technique and violin technique, even though those instruments have been around for hundreds of years. So it's just one of those things where you can really psych yourself out and keep changing. And, you know, you do something new and then like, oh, this is it. And then 2 weeks in, you're like, maybe it's not it. And then you start changing stuff the whole time, instead of working on your actual, you know, playing. Yeah, Max Grip Jazz 3, I love those as well. But I'm sponsored by Mathis Guitars, so it's kind of a similar pick to a Jazz 3, and you have all the logo here acts as like the Max Grip thing, and also it's Delrin, I think, is the material. It's quite soft in a way, but in a way it's not like hard plastic, because when you have hard plastic, at least for me, I get this clicky sound that I don't like. But, you know, I can send you a link and you can see which one I use, if I can find it here. It's even an old video of me on the page. What a flex. And I don't get paid by this company, by the way, so it's not a sponsor in that way. He just sends me pics every few months. So, and obviously this is such a, you know, low price point in terms of everything we buy for the guitar, that if I didn't like these picks, I would play picks that I like, right? So everything I use, from the solar guitars and all that stuff, even the guitar, even though, you know, these are way more expensive than picks, obviously, I wouldn't play these guitars if I didn't like them. What's the point of like, well, you get free guitars? Yeah, but if they're shit guitars, why would I play them, even if they're free? You know what I mean? So I think that's, maybe it doesn't need to be said, but I feel it needs to be said sometimes, because sometimes people feel like, oh, you just say that because you're getting free stuff. But I think most people would rather play stuff they like, and, you know, instead of getting free stuff that they don't like. So I think that goes for pretty much anyone. The problem probably is when people say they're using, you know, a certain brand of strings, but they actually use other brands, but they like the clout. But I use everything that I get, so. All right, I'm gonna go in 8 minutes. I'm gonna get some more practice in. If you have any more questions, just chuck it in the chat and let me know. Let's see, metronome. Okay, Gold Agent, since you have so many guitars, maybe you can answer this. Is it detrimental to your technique, guitar playing, to frequently switch and play different guitars? No, definitely not. I don't think so. You know, I have the Paul Reed Smith, I have the Strat, and then I have these, which is kind of super stratty, I guess. But all my solars feel kind of different. And also I practice a lot on a steel string acoustic and a nylon string, so I think it's just all good. And if you look at it, like take a guy like Andy Wood. Yeah, if you don't know who he is, he's amazing. Amazing guitar player, but he started on mandolin. He didn't start guitar until it was, I think he said 17 or something. And he can go between those without any problems. And obviously he started guitar on a way higher level because his picking was, you know, really good. Because that's all you do on a mandolin. You pick all the time. So it's not going to be detrimental to you. So don't worry about that. Just actually they found like in motor learning, meaning like motor skills, that having slight differences in what you're doing is actually helpful for your technique. So that's why it's so good to start down on guitar, for example, instead of just doing one exercise in the same place, move it up and down the fretboard, because it's just gonna be, you know, different tensions and all that stuff. So it's just gonna help. Yeah, it was a great interview. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. It's just gonna help. All right. Okay, gonna go very soon, but in case you don't even know about it, so I have the Practice Room Pro, right, where you can get personal help from me and get all my courses and that stuff. But I also have the regular Practice Room, where we're currently at 463 members. And you can, if you haven't checked that out and even know about it, go check it out. And you can try it out for free as well, and then you get some free licks and whatever. I really like the fact that where he talked about doing the Eric Johnson type licks, and he does it alternate picking. I think that was, you know, and he could sound more like Eric Johnson in his mind than if he tried to do the economy pick version. I've never liked that either. Doing that felt a bit weird, so. But he's a great player. And seems to be a great guy as well, so. So yeah, I'm gonna go, but be back tomorrow at some point.